Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Motorcycle Rewind, and today we talk about a 5-step process for restoring these vintage motorcycles. So guys, when you talk about restoring these vintage motorcycles, I like to start with, what does restoration mean to you? Do I want to take this old CL450 and bring it back to 100-point concourse restoration, touching every nut and bolt? Or does restoration mean that I just want to get it up and running, riding, make it pretty? That's the first step that you need to define when you're getting into these vintage motorcycles and you really want to get started restoring, quote unquote, one. Because what does it mean to you? Because what it means to me may be something completely different to somebody else. But just keep in mind that once you define that restoration process, it's going to come with a budget. So guys, you have to budget your time, energy, and resources when it comes to restoring one of these motorcycles. That's why defining your level of restoration first. How far do I want to take this? Then your restoration and your budget have to be in line. If I want to take this guy that, let's say I spent $500 for, and let's say a pristine version of this with the right buyer is maybe $5,000, maybe a little bit more if everything's good and properly sorted, maybe $5,000 to $6,000. Well, if my budget is going to cost me more than $5,000 or $6,000 to restore it, I'm never going to get my money back. So keep in mind, what am I spending? What do I want to spend to get to my level of restoration? Now, if this was my grandfather's motorcycle and it's going to become a family heirloom, well then money is not an object, right? The budget goes out the window for time, energy, and resources, because I'm going to spend the money to bring it back to the way it was when my grandfather had it. Keep those things in mind. A lot of times what happens is we jump into a vintage motorcycle regardless of whether we're going to restore it or not, and we load the parts cannon and we blow our budget out of the water even before we start. Right? So keep that in mind when you're looking at these things. One, I need to know what my definition of restoration is. And two, how much time am I going to be able to put towards this motorcycle? How much energy am I going to be able to give it, and how much money am I going to be able to give it? Because what you'll find, let's say I take this motorcycle and I don't want to spend more than $2,500 on it. I'm making up numbers, but let's just stay with me. Well then, would I be better off buying this motorcycle or buying a $2,500 one? Right? I would spend the money on buying a $2,500 one, especially if you don't want to tinker with it that much. Especially if your plan is to bring it to the shop to have work done on it. That's things you have to keep in mind, because that's how I end up buying motorcycles that have been taken apart because people thought it was going to be a whole lot quicker, a whole lot cheaper, and a whole lot less energy in doing these things. Even before you pick out the motorcycle, one, I need to know the level of restoration I want to get into. One, what's my budget? And then I need to start looking for motorcycles. So guys, the third step is now it's time to pick a bike. But how many times do we see it the other way? We pick a bike and then we just get into it because our enthusiasm gets the better of us, and we're spending money before we realize what the bike is even worth or what it could be worth, and then we're upside down in it. We can never get out from underneath it. We've all seen those ads on Marketplace or Craigslist or wherever you buy your motorcycles that they tell us how much money they put into it, but that's irrelevant to what the bike's worth. How much time, energy, and resources do I want to budget for it? What is my definition of restoration? How far do I want to take this before I even pick a bike? Whether it's your first one or your 50th one, we still have to do these things so that we get into it the right way. Okay, so the next step is to make it run. How do we just get the thing running? That's the first step. Before we spend any money, can I get it running with what I showed up with? I mean, everything that's on it, can I make it run? Does it just need to be, do parts need to be taken off and put back on? Meaning, take the starter apart, put it back together. Can we do things like that to really get this thing going without spending any money? I like to do that because it gives me room on the budget side for the make it pretty, which we're going to get to along the way, and the making it safe. Do yourself a favor and refrain from loading the parts cannon. Oh, I'm going to get new coils. Oh, I'm going to buy a rebuild kit for the carburetor. You may need a rebuild kit. You may not. right? Sometimes just good cleaning, put it back together, it's all good, as long as you don't break a gasket. But everything's good. But let's see if we can get it running without spending any money first. That's key. Let me know in the comments down below how you do it. This is how I do it. Doesn't make it the right way, it just makes it my way. I like to get into these things and get them going for as little money as possible, just because it's easier for me to justify it down the line to spending money on things that maybe it's got a rough tank and I want to go source a better original tank. Well, I can do that without having to paint this one. I can go out and source a better original paint if I haven't spent money on things I didn't have to spend money on, right? I try to come in under budget as much as possible. The next thing is to make it safe. Make it safe. Tires, brakes, it's going through all of those things so that it runs, it stops, everything's good. Lights, all of that stuff, so that when we do put it into service, it's safe. Those are the little things that you kind of have to spend money on. They're not pretty, but you gotta have them, right? We have to have brakes, we have to have lights, and we have to have tires that aren't gonna kill us. And guys, a lot of times when we're doing our budget, we don't think about, okay, I gotta put tires, I gotta put brakes on this thing, I gotta get lights. We don't add that in. Those should be automatic when you're looking at a bike, that I should automatically make the assumption that I'm gonna spend about $200, $250 on tires, tubes, brakes, all that stuff to make it safe. And guys, the best part of this whole restoration process is this next step, is we now get to make it pretty. It runs, it's safe, and now we can make it pretty. Now I'm gonna be 100% honest. I tend to do some of this stuff early on, things that I know I'm gonna have to change. If I know my tank is rusty, I'll look for that because I'm gonna need that. Because to me, the tank is the icing on the cake. You can have a beautifully running bike and it can be great everywhere and have a crappy tank and it's not gonna have the same curb appeal as one with a great tank. Right? So that tank is money that I tend to not skimp on. That's where I would spend money on, because that's the diamond on the ring. That's the piece that people see the most. So like I was saying, is I tend to do some of this pretty stuff earlier on. Why? Because it keeps me motivated about the project. That's why I typically clean things. I pressure wash it, make it look as good as I can early on, because it keeps me motivated about the project. The dirtier it looks and the longer it looks dirty, the less value I see in it. So I try to build as much value aesthetically in it as I can without spending any money right off the bat. Pressure washing it, clean up chrome, clean up the wheels, all of that stuff, because to me, it makes me feel more excited about the project. Although I'm giving you these 6 steps, you know, the define restoration, set a budget, choose a bike, make it run, make it safe, and then make it pretty. I like to do that stuff, but that's just what I like to do. Whatever's going to fit for you. These are guidelines that I look at, because, so I've already defined my level of restoration. And you can tell by the motorcycles on the channel, I just focus on making pretty riders. I don't ever do a restoration. The CB450K1 is probably the closest I got to a restoration. And it was probably a 7, 8 out of 10. I didn't change all the hardware. I did change some hardware, the hardware that you see the most, like on your handlebar clamps, things like that. I did replace that because you see that. That's at the top sitting right next to a beautiful tank. So it's little things like that that I do, but I'm not going to be the one that's going to take chrome to a plate, or I'm not going to replate the hardware, anything like that. That's not in the cards for me. I appreciate the people that can do that. I'm also not going to polish aluminum. That's not in the cards for me. That's for somebody else to do down the line. And so that's just in my opinion. That's just, I know my lane and I tend to stay in it. It's understanding who you are and what you want to do, I think, is the most important thing. I know my lane in these old motorcycles because it's my point of view. You know, if I had to define my point of view, is I am more of an originality kind of guy. The closer I can keep it to original, the better off I can. The more often than not that I can use an original paint original paint tank, I'm going to do that. Just because I believe that they're only original once, which means I don't have to restore it. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with them having scars. They're 50, 60 years old. I'm okay with that. Some people love them completely restored, and I'm okay with that too. That's why, there's all these different flavors of ice cream, because there's something for everybody. Just figure out what works best for you and then go at it. So guys, I want to thank you for watching yet another episode of Motorcycle Rewind. And do me a favor, like, tag, share, and follow us on Instagram at Motorcycle Rewind. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And while you're in the subscribing mood, just wander on over to our friends, Brickhouse Builds, Gold Guy, Moto Mango, Ace Cafe Bikes, Miles Zero Racers, Plan B Motos, Pete's Classic Cycle, and Lady Moto Bang. And give those guys a subscribe too. Thanks again, guys, and have a great day.